Well, hello and welcome. Thank you, Mr. Lupe Fiasco, for joining us today, sir. It's wonderful to have you. I'm sure you are known to them. I will introduce Lupe Fiasco, Chicago-born, Grammy Award-winning rapper, producer, entrepreneur, and activist. His studio albums are Food and Liquor from 2006, the first, followed by The Cool, Lasers, Food and Liquor 2, Tetsuo and Youth, Drogas Light, and most recently, Drogas Wave. Since then, he's also given us an EP, House. And he's been involved with organizations including Mural in Chicago and one that he'll be speaking about today, the Society of Spoken Art, SOSA. I want to give a quick shout out to some of Lupe's collaborators who are going to be working with him and hopefully with me as well during this residency, which will, we very much hope, bring Lupe in his own physical self to our MIT campus. Ekene Ijema, Ian Condry, Fox Harrell are on the call with us here, part of the conference. So we're looking forward to working together and also to connecting with others at MIT and to having an event, the Code Cipher, that will involve the community. So Lupe, let me start off by asking some about what you've been up to in these quite unconventional and turbulent times of the pandemic. You have dropped the House EP, which maybe has some stuff that you were thinking about beforehand. Those dinosaurs didn't come out of nowhere, but it also connects to and deals with some of the themes, crises, situations that we're in. You've done a charity concert, live streaming that from your home, and you started a podcast, the Lupe and Royce Show. Will you tell us some about what the pandemic's been like for you and how working during the time has been and what you've been able to accomplish, what connections you've been able to make?
Oh, well, thank you, Doc IT. Just want to do a microphone check, make sure folks can hear me. Thank you for the opportunity. Big shout out to the staff at MIT, as well as to all the folks running this behind the scenes, Catherine Higgins, the other Nick who's running the AV, and all the other folks for putting this together. And shout out to the other IRs, Dr. Fox. And there's also some SOSA ITs that are in the chat today. So appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. Really excited about the residency and can't wait to start exploring ideas and concepts and thoughts. Pandemic wise, to turn it towards that, first and foremost, prayers and sympathies go out to the families and condolences to the folks who've lost people, astronomical amount of human loss and human suffering during this time. So definitely don't want to overstep that and really pay homage to that, but also pay homage to the frontline workers and the different folks who are taking care of the elderly and the different peoples, volunteering their services and being on the front lines, helping fight back this pandemic. So definitely want to give them the shine. And with that said, it's a constrained time, and one of the things that we which we'll get into when we talk about SOSA, is how do you operate in a constraint? How do you look at something with certain limitations and certain parameters and still execute, through that. So, everything went digital. It was literally last few days of freedom, if you want to call that, before there were lockdowns and people kind of got their senses together and really understood what was about to take place. We were on the days away from going to the airport, and getting on the plane and doing touring and doing this, then Europe, then a bunch of shows, and everything was canceled, pushed well into next year now. And so it became digital. What can you do digitally? What can you do at a distance? not only for the sake of the health of other folks, but for the sake of maintaining your own business, and your kind of entrepreneurial aspirations. So it really became like, okay, we got to hit social media heavy. How can we, manipulate this and insert ourselves in a meaningful way in that space? So I started to do basically daily chats, basically kind of public health, letting people know to wear their masks, this, that, and the third. And then just chatting with the fans, and that evolved into, a podcast, with a fellow IT, actually, Royce 59. He was in talks with one of my friends to do a podcast, and Royce called me out the blue and was like, let's do one together. So, you get the Royce 59 show birthed out of, the pandemic. Same thing with the House EP, just kind of languishing around the house, get a random tweet from somebody, say, hey, this is a nice beat, you should rap on it. Say, you know what, you're right. And then that goes into getting a relationship with the producer, and then us building a EP together and putting it out, and titling it House, to kind of reinforce this concept of staying at home, but making do with what you have, in these rather constrained times. And then in terms of just streaming concerts and things like that, I had a few opportunities, fortunately, at a space in my career where I do have some legacy material. I still got some relevance. I still got some commercial appeal. So, there's folks who are still willing to kind of show up to their laptops for a Lupe Fiasco concert. So, we took advantage of that. And I actually think we got another one coming up pretty soon as well. We're supposed to be doing a food and liquor tour now. So I think we're going to do a digital version, for the fans until things kind of open back up.
So that's great to hear about, because I know other people want to, try to figure out how to carry on, our practices, our artistic practices, our reaching out and connecting with people socially into this very strange time. And so it's good to share the things that work in those regards. But this is also a chance to talk about something which involved, among other things, it involves distance learning, which is what we're doing now at MIT. And SOSA, so first of all, I don't want to say that SOSA is a distance learning organization, because it's more than that, I know. Maybe instead of saying anything more, I'll ask you to just introduce the organization in general, tell us some about it. And then we can go into some of the different aspects, different components of what it does.
Absolutely. And just to kind of be thorough and maybe start at the beginning of the narrative, I'm a rapper. Started rapping when I was maybe 12, maybe 13, but professionally at 17, like literally looking down the barrel of a record deal, creating a company, getting that deal, losing that deal, getting another deal, the whole rigmarole of the recording artist experience. And at the same time, balancing, the commercial aspect, but also with the, perfecting and building your craft at the same time. So do interviews, do concerts, sign record deals, but then also how do I maximize my art, and create spaces for me to progress through my art. And the early part of my career was all about, this is kind of pre-record deal pieces of my career, was all about honing the craft, understanding what the craft is, and then building on it, and then commercializing it, to be blunt, what's the best thing that I can do. But the process was very authentic. It was very natural. It was studying other rappers, it was, at that point, rap, and even today, rap is very much so in the wild. And so you have to kind of find forms to study it and understand it and practice it. SOSA comes up as an idea because in that process of going into the commercial space of entertainment, it's a lot of wolves out there, a lot of bad things that go down, some wonderful things as well, but some bad things that could be fixed if we had this wouldn't happen if we had that. We would have a fighting chance if we had this. And that if was always a collective, right? But a collective that had a certain cachet and a force to collective bargain, right, to bargain collectively, right, and have certain incentives, but also be able to de-incentivize certain things in the face of this kind of industrial, onslaught. And there was a lot of different layers to that. And it was kind of like, man, if we had a union, I wouldn't even have to worry about this. If such and such had a union, he wouldn't have to worry about that. If we had a union, she wouldn't be going crazy right now thinking about this or thinking about that. It just felt like a union or some type of collective bargaining aspect would solve a lot of issues. And so the wheels get to turning, right? And it becomes, okay, well, what does that look like? And it's business, so why not a business? And the business aspect of it was just way too many moving parts, right? Way too many different sales, way too many different allegiances from artists to certain business practices and certain business people. So that was kind of DOA. The next one was, okay, well, what about creative? What if we have this creative community that is just all about creativity? Mm-hmm. And the wall with that was, the bed being too soft on that one was, there's not enough objectivity. There's too much subjectivity. It's so kind of ambiguous that you'll never find like central points. It'll just be based on the whims of if you like this or if you like that. And if you don't, then you don't. If you do, you do. But that could change the next day, and you can't really build what I felt was a collective off of something so soft. So what was left was the objectives, the thing that we never really had in rap, never really had in hip hop, was what about an institution, right? What about the academics? What does the academics of rap look like? We know what the creative looks like. We know what the business looks like. But what does the academics look like of rap? And so it just became this, oh, that's the move. Let's see if I hit any walls along the way. And I didn't. And if anything, I got accepted into, it was more doors. It was actually all doors, like, hey, yeah, come in and we're working on this. And, have you studied modern poetics, and have you looked into rhetoric, and have you looked into this, and have you looked into that? So anyway, it became, very apparent that to build the foundation to build on would be a foundation of academics, right? It would make everybody even. So it didn't matter how commercially successful you were. It didn't matter how artistically gifted you were. If you didn't have a grasp of the academia of our craft, then we were all on the same page, right? And it was like, okay, cool. So now we bring everybody down to zero for the most part. And then everybody can start to build on the same principles, right? And the same kind of ideas and concepts and things like that. Now, whether you agree with them, right? Whether you choose to practice them or not, they're still objectively proven. It's kind of data-driven, fact-driven. And even if it's a theory that's been well kind of talked about and thrown around. So that became the job. It became like, okay, let's compile as much of the back end, the academics, the math and the science and the language theory and the cognitive theory and everything that goes into speaking, and art, a spoken art form. And you get the Society of Spoken Art, from that, which is a guild. Now go ahead, Doc. I'm sorry.
No. I just want to highlight these two things that I think are really fascinating. One, that SOSA as a organization is this process of working through like the different things it could be. Could it be a union? Could it be a company? Could it be creativity? But and through thinking that through that and trying out these different ideas, talking about them, like you reach something. So it's not that you come up with the idea in its perfect form and then you realize it, but you work through that and you develop to what it is that works out for you. And the other thing that is, from my perspective, I'm glad about it very much for SOSA, but very funny, is the idea that sort of that academic perspective is one that leads toward equality and sort of gets you away from hierarchies and things like this, right? Because we're, look at us, we are so hierarchical that you have to do your master's degree, PhD, do postdoc, you get to be a junior faculty member, you get tenure. It's all of this that has a lot of hierarchy built in here. And so I'm always looking for opportunities, ways to work collectively, as you say, that can mix in to what for us has a lot of hierarchy and structure. But it's good to hear how that concept is different in the context of SOSA.
But I would be betraying honesty if I did not, talk about the structure of SOSA, right? Which kind of is hierarchical, but I think maybe some of the ITs can speak to this, is in a very good way, right? And then how does that balance out with having a hierarchy? So we're built, SOSA structured as a guild, where there's apprentices, journeymen, masters, grandmasters, and then grandmasters with philosophy and science, which is like this super high level kind of thing. But it's all based on time. So it is very much so a tenured kind of atmosphere. When you spend 2 years as a apprentice, you spend another 8 years as a journeyman, 10 years you become a master, 20 years you become a grandmaster, 30 years plus you become grandmaster of philosophy and science. And it's that seems very structured, and it is. It's not even that it seems, right? It is very much so structured. But I think the difference between SOSA as an institution and say something like a MIT, for example, is that SOSA's end goal isn't just commercialization. It's not to go get a job. It's interesting because the folks who come in already have jobs. So it's more like a master's program in that capacity, where you already have a certain understanding of the craft. This is to open you up to a side of the craft that you would never find, so to speak, in the wild. So there is hierarchy, but the goal of the institution as a whole isn't for you to take your master IT status in SOSA and go and get a job, or to use it as this or use it as that. It's more internal facing, to give the ITs that are in SOSA something to work towards. And then the interesting part is, for certain institutions, the label is already defined, right? It's defined for you. Whereas in SOSA, because it's so new, SOSA's been around for maybe about 6 or 7 years now. The members, they define what that means. What does it mean to be a journeyman? What does it mean to be a master? What does it mean to be a grandmaster? And there's a certain fluidity in that, and a certain allowance for certain things. So you may think if you get a PhD, you got to have a dissertation and a workload, and you got to have a repeat. And it's just a constant layering. Whereas, you might have a conversation in SOSA where it's to be a master is, can you do one thing? And is that one thing that you do solid enough, useful enough, beautiful enough to withstand the test of time, right? And that ability to create that viewer thing qualifies you for that kind of status. But it's very much so a collective, even in the sense of a lot of that is distributed. A lot of that, what do you want the organization to be, to look like, to feel like, is distributed to its members. Because at the end of the day, that's what SOSA is. So when you mention this at a distance, we're kind of optimal for this environment, right? Because a lot of what SOSA does is at a distance in various formats. But that idea of, SOSA is the people. It is the members, it is the ideas, it's the concepts, versus a building or versus some platform that is built off of. So,
and can you tell us some about, you mentioned the solid, the useful, the beautiful. Can you tell us about FUV, about firmitas, utilitas, and venustas, these ideas of what the foundation is of what we do in SOSA?
Absolutely. So again, SOSA, just to reinforce, SOSA is Society of Spoken Art. It's meant to be, it's not meant to be a place to teach you how to rap, right? It's not a place that's meant to create commercial opportunities for you as a rapper to go do that, right? We're not like an agency or anything like that, because all of that stuff already exists. We're not a record label. All that already exists. What didn't exist was an academic institution based solely on a sole focus on rap as an art form, but also as a science. And because of that, because it's so new, you have this freedom to kind of create a structure, like to create from scratch. And so we looked at, pre-existing kind of ideas and concepts. Again, a guild, for example, but then what kind of guild? And so looking at the world of architecture, and we looked at architecture because at SOSA, we define RAPS as it's an acronym for rhetorical, anthropological, philosophical structures, right? That's how we look at RAPS. That's what a RAP is to us. And that structural aspect is very important. And it immediately lends us to some of the foundational principles of like classical architecture, which is this idea of form follows function, right? And form follows function is Louis Sullivan, but he pulls that from even more classic, literal classic Greek kind of aspects of Roman aspects. It'd be firmitas utilitas venustas. This idea of things if you build a building, a structure, it has to be solid, it has to be useful, it has to have a utility, but it also has to be beautiful, and if you're operating under those three, constantly using those as reference points, at least as macros, what you'll wind up with is the optimal structure, for whatever you want to do it for. So we pull that into SOSA, this idea of FUV, firmitas, utilitas, venustas, solidity, usefulness, and beauty. Elegance is another way to kind of think about that and apply that to rap, and so are the raps, these rhetorical, anthropological, philosophical structures that you're crafting. Do they possess and operate amongst all of these three principles at the very least, right? So there can be more, or you can add on more, you can invent more, you can, cross ideas, but at the very least, does it represent these three kind of ideals and realities too?
Yeah. So, so let's talk about, I think the architectural connection and those principles in particular, sort of keeping in mind that in questioning yourself as to, are you doing something that fulfills those three, is something that brings people together over a distance, along with their dedication to put in the work, to study together, and their background, their love of hip hop, their expertise. For the most part, there's no one exception, but expert rappers that they are. And
no self-deprecation there, Doc. Stop it.
but I do want to ask, because the diversity of people in SOSA trying to come together and study what's very difficult material, like things that you would really be talking about, in a graduate curriculum, right? But you have people who have PhDs, you have people who are 12 years old.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
we do. Well, not 12 anymore.
But who started off that way?
They started off that way, very much
as
so.
part of SOSA, right?
Surely.
Yeah.
I think we look at, SOSA from its inception. SOSA was meant to be very difficult, right? It was meant to start at the top, right? And the first iterations were attracting the best rappers in the world, unapologetically. Like SOSA's core founding members are the best rappers in the world, right? And then working down, and then what? So now if we're starting there, then, okay, we don't want to go down, we want to keep going up. So, okay, now our curriculum that we want to engage with has to be the top of the pops. It has to be work from Dr. Nick Mumford. If we're going to talk about computation and computational studies, we're going to go to MIT, right? And we're going to find or create associations with, these people who are the experts in their field. But that isn't to the point where it's, computer jargon and no one can understand it except it has to kind of, because we're not geniuses in that space. We're geniuses as rappers, right? But stepping out of that, we got to take some baby steps. But we still, challenged ourselves to create a curriculum and tie into folks and individuals and other institutions that were operating at the highest level. So when we talk about we want to study semiotics, and bring semiotics, the conversation of rap and rappers, we go to the semiotics lab at University of Pennsylvania, talk to Dr. Asif Agha and like, hey, there's 12 rappers in this room. Tell us about semiotics. And he hands us a book this thick, and
Yep.
kind of like, well, maybe it's a little much, but we appreciate it, Doc. And then engaging folks like yourself, engaging folks like Dr. Fox-Arell, but also engaging folks like we call her the hip hop mom, Chef IR. For folks that don't know, IR, if we throw that around, there's some jargon in SOSA. IR stands for in residence, and actually Doc IT. I can't tell you what IT means, but IR means in residence, and Doc IT here started out as one of our academics in residence. This process of finding the best in their fields that were willing to kind of communicate and reciprocate back into our world. So we always looked at SOSA as being like the MIT of rap or the Navy SEALs of rap, right? But then to turn that phrase, to have something to work towards, it becomes, how can we establish that the Navy SEALs, looks at themselves as the rap of the military, or the SOSA of the military type situation, So it is about borrowing, but it also is about like challenging and adding on the experiences and the knowledge that we've kind of cultivated in our own space. And you said the diversity of it ranges from the young, the old, the really, really good, the really, really good, as we operate in that space. And, people from all walks of life and all disciplines and all skill levels. And again, it's more about, we say at SOSA that, disrespect in SOSA is not doing the work, so you can be a jerk, you can be the bohemian, meditative, nobody talk to me until, but as long as you're doing that work, as long as you're turning in those assignments and doing those other stuff, you're fully invested.
And so there's a lot of engagement with, you mentioned semiotics, but also linguistics, conceptual metaphor theory, computation, programming, the history of rap and hip hop, which is even among people who are very good rappers these days, is often overlooked. People don't go back to the 70s a lot of times to really dig into that, right? So one of the things I find interesting, though, about SOSA is that is always brought back into connection with one's own work and with particular verses that you find very good. So it's not just an abstract discussion, right? But you're trying to figure out, for instance, what does conceptual metaphor theory have to tell you about the way you write verses as a rapper? It's a practice-based type of activity. Ultimately, even as your wanderings into what may seem like very esoteric fields, trying to understand Fox-Harrell's idea of phantasms and the way that that type of imagination, culturally connects with what people can do in rap. Making those connections back to one's own work seems to be an important part of what people are doing in SOSA.
Absolutely, it's to look at, and to give people some framework so it's not all over the place. What we're specifically talking about now is SOSA's apprentice program, which is a 2-year program that no matter where you are in rap, no matter how many records you sold, if you're coming into SOSA and you want to do it the long way, you're in the trenches for 2 years. And so there's this program that we do where it's the history of rap, basically. We have Kevin Beecham IR, who's like the Einstein of rap verses, in terms of just his ability to understand them, theorize against them, but then has a history of them. So he's written an encyclopedia of every rap verse ever written, and it's from 1979 to 1989. So we had the pleasure of being able to pull him in to create a curriculum for us in terms of rap history. And even for me, it was like things that I'd never heard, right? As a guy who's like, hey, can you build this for us? And going through the practice of, going back to how we all started, looking at someone else's work, breaking it down, trying to become that work, and then pull out aspects of that work and add it to our own toolbox, but then also find places in the work where there's opportunity for innovation, right? To impinge oneself into the work itself. But in that process, you're reinforcing the history, right? Reinforcing the origin points of our craft, which is super important. So SOSA kind of spans an entire spectrum of finding our history as rappers in every possible nook and cranny that it happens to exist. And then also jumping all the way to the other side of the spectrum and seeing, what is our relationship to computation? What is our relationship to machine learning? What is our relationship to AI as rappers, and what does that look like? What is the contemporary circumstances? Which, as just as much we might not have heard any of those verses from 81, we might not be hearing of any of this work that's being done in labs at MIT, for example. So a lot of the process was finding out the history, not only of rap, but then also finding out the history of all these other fields, right? So we can make sure that we're caught up to a certain degree, so that when we do decide to sit down and create work and make that decision, that we're operating off all of these kind of awarenesses, these situational awarenesses of what's been done before, what hasn't been done before, so you can have more informed decisions. And again, that's not for the sake of going out to create a better commercially successful album, right? At the end of the day, it can clearly just be for your own personal working within the craft. And fortunately, SOSA was able to, in that process, able to create a space. I won't call it a safe space, because we still call people whack at SOSA, but it has a very specific definition, very specific acronym.
It's a safer space.
While we use it. But it is a space where you can just exist and present work in a fashion that's not, critiqued for its lack of commerciality or its lack of this or lack of that, and given its flowers and understanding in this very specific context of why you're doing this work. And it doesn't have to be like the best super flips of metaphors and double, triple entendres. It could just be executing on a very simple constraint and finding space for other folks who know what you're doing, having that same awareness that you have, and find that kind of profoundness in a very simple. And I think when folks understand that, and ITs, when they go back to the older work, the classic work, right? They come with it with that understanding of, oh, now I can see why this was not only just culturally significant, but intellectually significant, right? So there's that aspect of it as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's a lot to say about studying. People can be very dismissive of early rap, and that, well, what we're doing now is so much more advanced. It doesn't have any relationship to that. Or there's the other thing is, that the idea that's like, oh, I don't want to be a biter. I don't want to, focus on other people's stuff. I just want to do my own thing, which a lot of people in creative writing are like. People will be like, oh yeah, I don't read my contemporaries. I'm not interested in that. I only read the past. So trying to navigate all that and figure out like how you engage with the culture in not just knowing the stuff or hearing the stuff or having taste, liking certain things, but actually getting into it and studying it, like being able to say like, yeah, this is a rapper who it's not just a rapper I like, but I'm going to study this particular work. Like that's gonna fold into my own stuff. Do you want to say any stuff about SOSA beyond the apprentice program, because we're talking about that as a learning sort of context, because I think it's important to I think it's important to what we do at MIT. I mean, we didn't know we'd be in this distance learning pandemic situation when we first talked about your coming. And so I think it's important no matter what, but the idea of how we learn when we're distributed different places, is even more urgent now. But that's also not the only thing that SOSA does.
Right.
And so if you want to say some more about what SOSA is, what it does, where it's headed, I want to give you the chance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about creating a space, for rappers to be confident and comfortable and universal in their space, right? Meaning that your space has now become a mirror of the entire world because you deal specifically with language, and language is the universal tying factor that ties everything together. And that you possess a certain mastery of language, right? And compressing data and being able to understand and identify nuance. And you can hear a song 5 or 6 different ways. So now when you're hearing, now that you've been trained to understand what conceptual metaphor is, how deep it is in our basic communications, you can start to do these kind of real-time etymological breakdowns, right? Of like hearing something and you can hear it 5 different ways, right? And break down certain aspects of it that may be going over people's heads, or really getting to the core of what people are expressing, right? So there's, where can you apply that, right? So now you're a rapper, but now you can seriously become a therapist, right? You can seriously apply yourself to a different dimension or a different field and have effect and impact without changing the way that you think. Because the way you think is beautiful, right? The way you think is useful. The way you think is solid. If you can find a way to unite all that stuff and apply things, you can actually go out and make the world a better place in a very intentional way, right? And be aware of your impacts and be aware of where you're kind of slacking off. So there's that kind of like more total, more maybe aspirational aspect of SOSA, but then down to the nuts and bolts. It's about, going out and paying homage and finding and doing the conservancy and the archival aspects of our forefathers and foremothers, in this space, and giving it, wildest dreams type situation is going back to that collective bargaining aspect, but doing it in a way where we're not trying to be adversarial to the industry, but provide services, for our OGs, to provide places for them to come and take care of certain ideas and initiatives and just be this bridge between worlds, right? The new generation and the old generation, right? And show and present that and create this kind of reciprocity. So I mean, there's that aspect of it.
Past, present, and future.
Absolutely. And then there's have fun at the what does it look like to have a rap sporting event, of which you are the world champion right now. Well, what does it look like to take rap and all these other spaces, what does it look like as a sporting event? What does it look like as a game? What does it look like and bring to it certain intentionalities and certain merits that may or may not work, like a space again to kind of have fun with all the aspects of our craft.
So I want to leave some time for the other people on this call. We got dozens of people who I know have their questions for you, but just because you're in space, and also because SOSA is a North American organization, we should say.
Yes.
But I want to ask also about your perspective on rap and hip hop as a global phenomenon, because, for instance, Professor Ian Condry has done the major work on Japanese hip hop. Professor Akane Ijima does, multilingual sound projects, and we're very aware that what began in the Bronx is radically, wildly distributed throughout the world these days. What does that mean in this current context?
I mean, SOSA is international. We got an IT or two stationed in the UK. Okay. One of the issues, and again, it's separating the apprentice program from the entirety of SOSA, where it was like just time constraints. Part of the distributed distance learning is like can you carry a conversation or hold a course with somebody in Singapore while you're over here and they're over there and over there. And then language barriers.
Tell me all about that, because we have those issues right now.
Which I actually literally have done, and from Hong Kong and different places chiming in to run a room or something. But there has been work done to internationalize SOSA, and but some of the barriers are the language barriers. So part of the work over the last few years have been like identifying like, coalitions of the willing, completely in a different language, to do the same work we did here, to find, to immerse yourself in the linguistics of your language, right, of your native language, and all of the little nooks and crannies and things like that. And then, partner with the institutions that exist, that promote that or conserve that type of thing. And then find identify the members in your rap community that you think would want to be a part of something like SOSA. And so we've been kind of like identifying different folks, bringing them up to speed on what SOSA is, and not trying to anglicize it, not trying to Americanize it. Like, here's the international guild. But yes, if it's completely in Tagalog, then so be it. If it's completely in Mandarin, then so be it. And maybe we can meet up in the middle somewhere and trade notes and do some translation. But that is one of the goals for SOSA, to be even more international than it is right now. Especially coming off of the constraints of distance learning and the apprentice program and stuff like that. So for sure.
I mean, the organization doesn't have to be the UN to be successful.
Right.
There's people other, there's the people, in a way also you look at it as the success of hip hop and the way it has energized, across international boundaries, breakdancing as an Olympic event, right, coming up.
Congratulations, breakdance. So, rap will be next. Rap will be next.
Exactly. So, all right, let me see if people can ask questions using their own voice. You can have your camera on or not. People can put some questions into the chat. I want to let some of our many participants have a chance to speak with you also, Lupe.
For sure.
All right. Ina has a question.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Lupe. I mean, I'm a big fan. I heard Gold Watch in 2007 and my life was transformed. I had to go look up all those things. Cool magazines and Diptyque candles, but thank you. You truly are an inspiration. I've been enlightened today to hear about SOSA. In academia, there's a tension of, pursuing like research for the sake of it, or going out to do stuff with the knowledge and skills you have, or being commercial, which we know rap can be. Do you envision that happening, where there's this fluidity, people come into SOSA and go out to create albums and come back? Or, how do you see that tension kind of working out?
I mean, we've we're a trusted organization, so we're very much so under the cone of silence. But I mean, we've had that. We've had ITs in SOSA learn lessons in SOSA, and then it's a song, right? And it's like great, And then the other side, where there's things that are in SOSA that are so just complex, right? It requires such an amount of understanding the history of how you got to that work that nobody outside of SOSA would care about it. So there's that kind of aspect. Some of the research and the work that's being done in SOSA isn't fit for public consumption, right? But I think that's, we're very open about, what the goal of SOSA is, which is to create a space for rappers of all walks of life, whether you're a super commercial rapper, or whatever your piece may be, to have a place to call home, in 100 years, in 1,000 years, and here's a place where you can come and there's no commercial pressure to perform. There's no creative pressure to perform. But there is an academic pressure to perform, right? It's not to have no pressure, but a different kind of pressure, that we feel will, we say this, but we know this. We say that, SOSA is not about making you a better rapper, but we know SOSA is going to make you a better rapper, and everybody who's come through SOSA, not to say to come out the other side, because you can never leave SOSA, but within SOSA, people become better rappers. You take amazing rappers, they become insanely amazing rappers, just from the pressure cooker of the environment, the constraints that you're supplied with, and the kind of the demands, that are put upon you as a member of SOSA. So if you want to take, and I'm sure, and it's all welcome, ITs that take this and make that amazing album out of it, that without SOSA, it might have been a really good album. But now you've kind of understood your space a little bit better. You understand the entirety of rap a little better. You know what you're really, really good at, right? And then you say, you know what? I would, if I wasn't in SOSA, and this is me speaking for myself, right? If I wasn't in SOSA, I would have never made that, because I would have been trying to follow a commercial, route, or I've been trying to follow a creative route. But since I'm in SOSA, I'm gonna take an academic chance. I'm gonna implement something highly conceptual into this work, and let's go. And you may not sell 1 billion records, but you might make one of the greatest rap albums of all time.
So Sami has a question, and then Casimir.
Yes, hi Lupe, thank you very much for taking the time. So my question was sort of, it seems to be like SOSA kind of deals with kind of what a lot of people would consider like good rap, quote unquote, which is like the pure lyricism of it and like how you put the words together. I was wondering how you personally and like SOSA institution kind of reconciles that with the new subgenres of hip hop that come out that have less weight to the actual lyrics and more of how they sound within songs. And also, how is that like, how do you teach something like that considering it's more abstract?
I mean, one of the things in SOSA is SOSA's about rap, but it's not about rap. What do you mean, Wassel? SOSA's about the rappers. It's not about what they rap about. So you can rap about whatever you want. It can be as deep or as high as you want. What SOSA demands is that once you rap it, that you're able to write an essay about what's in it, right? And not what's in it from a conceptual point of view, but from an actual figures of speech. Can you label and flag all the figures of speech? Can you label all of the rhetorical operations that you just performed or didn't perform? What are the feminine rhymes or the masculine rhymes? What is the core metaphor that you were operating off of? And then also pop quiz, what is the structure of a metaphor and how does it interact with your angular gyrus, to your to the structures of your brain? Like, where is this stuff coming from? So it's a completely different conversation that starts to happen, right? And that's why I say you can hear a song 5 different ways. You can hear it as just cultural expression of the times. SOSA or SOSA IT, we hear it as like, that's about 18 slant rhymes. And then there's, I see the core metaphor is that, I see what kind of, like historical construct that he's kind of pushing. There's a certain, there's other aspects that kind of come to light, which kind of, belittle or, overshadow, do I like this? Is this, of a standard set up by some arbitrary, magazine or some message board. So it's a little bit deeper than that. So yes, SOSA is about rap, but not rap as, go check out my mixtape. Rap as, this is a rhetorical, anthropological, philosophical structure, and here's why and how, right? More of a science than of an art, so to speak. Hope that answers your question. Appreciate the question as well, brother.
That was great. Thank you very much.
There's a question from Casimir, and I think we'll have time for one more if someone has another.
So yeah, how's it going? I've been a huge fan since middle school, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about like you personally, if that would be okay.
Sure.
So I wanted to know, I've like heard stories about from people like close to you online about you like walking through your high school, like just freestyling, everybody would follow you around and stuff. And I wanted to sort of know about sort of what was your creative and artistic process to make such a great work like Food and Liquor, and how has that process evolved? As well as like how much sort of technical thought do you like sort of put into these verses, or is it some sort of like you just naturally put out something and then after the fact, you come back and you're like, oh, there's like an extended metaphor, a triple entendre here, something like that.
I mean, to answer the first question last, and I'll go back to it. Right now, I've gone through so many different processes that I don't necessarily have to just intentionally do one or two. Like, it just happens now. Like, at this point, the way I've been doing rap and investigating it and understanding it, it just happens, you know. And, you know, going through SOSA, I understand why that happens, right? Not to keep beating you over the head with SOSA. But there is something to understanding like what that is. Like, oh, I don't even need to like try. This is just what I do. If I put myself in a proper context, then this will come out. Do I still require certain inputs? Absolutely. Like, do I need to listen to some Jay-Z, right, to really get the thing going? Yes. You know, so I'll listen to Hobie Baby and be like, okay, I don't want to rap today. I need to rap today. I'm gonna listen to some Hobie Baby, and then I'm rapping, right? It sets things off. So it's important to surround yourself with inspirations, right? And be very intentional in the types of inspirations that you're trying to, you know, that you want to that's relative to your end result, right? The mythology of the young Lupe Fiasco, it is a lot of mythology, but it is true though. At the same time, too, there is those people who were following me around was my old rap crew, right? So it was like my homies who also rap. Let's all go through the hallways and rap together, right? We would go home, and the same way we had homework for whatever class, we also had homework to do a verse to come back to school the next day with a new verse. And that was kind of thing. Can you create a whole new verse, you know, coming back, you know, once you go home and come back to school? And so, I mean, part of that to bring it a little bit back into SOSA and then take it back out of SOSA is like, it's all of those processes and things that were happening and things that we were doing, trying to learn how to become rappers. What happens if you formalize that, right? What if you can put that into a certain box, right? At least from the performative standpoint, to make it not necessarily simple, because it's definitely not simple, but, you know, compartmentalize it in a very precise place. So it's not all this like feel, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel this, or I think that this is that. Is something to have a certain level of comfort when you know, like, if I do X, Y, Z, this is gonna happen, right? And then you ain't gotta worry about it. You can just automate and you keep it moving. So I had my first record deal. I think I was looking at my first record deal when I was still in high school. So it was a different kind of thing. It was like, yeah, I'm freestyling, but I got this record deal, you know what I'm saying? So it was like all of like rap, being a good rapper, but then also like, I got this deal, you know what I'm saying? Or I got this on the verge too. So I really feel like that my upbringing wasn't as pure as it may seem, because even as I was learning how to rap, I had commercial opportunities, you know, and it's a difference when you just like, all you doing is learning how to rap, right? And then you like, okay, now that I'm done, let me go get these commercial opportunities. So I learned a lot of what I know on the road. You know, I learned a lot of what I do, you know, in the studio versus kind of like in the cypher, you know, or at the open mic. You know, it was like my test run, you know, is, you know, my test drive is the race. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I hope that answers your question, brother. I apologize if it was a little too redundant.
No, that was perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so we got a question from Obi.
Yeah, can you hear me? All right, yeah, perfect. Thank you for your time. Also,
yeah. Hey, what's up?
Hi.
Thank you.
So just thank you so much. And I love this idea of SOSA primarily. I love how you're bringing academia to creativity. And something that kind of came to mind is how there is sort of overlap here. And I was wondering how you've tried to encapsulate the voices of people that are underrepresented, not only in rap, but in academia, particularly women. So how have you tried to target that issue in your own establishment?
I mean, it's a lot of rap is men, you know. But the kicker is that the fundamental core aspects of rap, the term conscious rapper, right? Even that term going all the way back to 1979, it wasn't a guy, right? It wasn't Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. They won first, right? It wasn't broken. It wasn't. It was a 15-year-old. There's the age piece for you, right? A 15-year-old female MC by the name of Sweet T, right? IT, who a lot of people don't know, right? Even female rappers, even male rappers, right? Even just in general, that this young woman was the first person on wax and a released record to talk about the prison industrial complex in a very direct way, right? Not kind of beating around the bush or creating a metaphor for it, but in a very direct way, talking about the police, right? Bringing light to the injustices in the neighborhood, right? But then also just conceptually killing you with bars and metaphors and stuff like that same time too. But when it got to the content of it, you know, it becomes like, whoa, you know, this isn't a grandfather. You know how they talk about grandfathers, or like the conscious rap has a grandmother, not a grandfather, right? That birthed that kind of concept and that idea, and even the way that we practice conscious rap today, and the way we talk about subjects today started with this 15-year-old girl, right? Sweet T, IT. And so in SOSA, there is this kind of like, you look at certain pieces of the curriculum, you look at, but it's different because to be fair, so one of the books that we study outside of rap is called Jokes in the Linguistic Mind, which is written by this female professor, you know, who just so happens to have a depth of knowledge in jokes and cognition and things like that. And we study her deeply, right? She's one of the core kind of manuals that we riff off of and use as a guide. That 12-year-old that Doc IT mentioned earlier in the talk, you know, is this young 12-year-old girl, you know, who's one of the best rappers in the world, you know. And it's kind of like we're at the mercy of everyone else, you know, breaking through these kind of patriarchal pieces. But I think the great thing about SOSA versus any other kind of group that's dealing with this is that we're new. So we don't have any excuses, right? So we can come in with intention to bring aboard as many participatory academics that are female, SOSA ITs that are female. Our mother hen at SOSA is a mother hen. Nikki Jean IT is like the mom of SOSA, keeps everything running and on point. And hopefully over the next few years, as we build out SOSA and grow it and do different things, there's more of an intentionality to bring in more female MCs, but also more female academics to come in and participate. But I think that we've done somewhat of a good job. We probably get a B-. I'll give us a B- for that. But I mean, unfortunately in rap, when you look out there, it is a dearth of that, especially when we first started. But now, different. There's a lot more female representation. And so hopefully SOSA's books will reflect that in the future.
Awesome, thank you.
Appreciate you.
So we have our closed captioning for another few minutes. And there's another question from Casimir. If anybody else does want to ask something of Lupe, please raise your hand. We'll go for as long as we have time.
Cool. And just to, yeah, in the meantime, if somebody pops in or not, just to kind of like reestablish some of my goals here at in this residency is to, you know, introduce folks to SOSA, introduce the kind of the point of view that I take when looking at rap, and very interested to kind of like participate in the various capacities in various groups over at MIT, not only personally for my own creative selfishness, but also to understand, which was one of the points of doing this residency, was to understand how a institution works, you know, to kind of go into an institution, see it's similar to the question that the young lady just asked, you know, lack of representation in one kind of demographic. How can SOSA learn from that? So we don't make that same, have that same kind of critique leveled against us. what are some other just administrative aspects, and then what is the freedoms of creativity that are there as well. So there is a learning arc for me in this residency, and it outside of me just being a rapper, but treating SOSA as a rap and seeing how it can build and help create the best verse possible to meet our goals, in addition to me just wanting to, battle rap a computer, and visit the nuclear reactor so I can say that I did it,
Yeah, I keep wanting to stop by and see if my ID works on that door. Probably not these days. It doesn't work anywhere on campus. Casimir had a question. Another one.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm like taking so much time.
Nah, man. Nah, rock out is fine. It's fine.
But yeah, so I mean something that you were saying to, that's my friend Abi, in terms of like socially conscious rap and things like that. There's a line from like a Jay-Z song that I'm sure you know, it's a Moment of Clarity, where he's talking about like he went platinum and he hasn't been rapping like Common Sense. And I've always been kind of curious, like you have the skill, like undeniably, to have been like a Jay-Z level or a Drake level rapper. What is it that sort of like caused you or sort of motivated you to shift in a more like socially conscious and arguably less popular direction? And are you sort of like spreading that socially conscious culture through SOSA?
For me, it was a decision to either put out Kick Push or put out this song about the streets. And that literally happened. It was a crossroad of like, okay, you're really finna put out your first record. You're really finna take this road, right? And like my friends were in prison, and it was kind of like coming out of a circumstance of the hood. And it's like, here's your crossroads moment where you can either continue to add to that or you can challenge it, right? Create another path. The one path is laden with gold and riches, right? The other path is laden with a little bit of gold, but a lot of controversy, a lot of other things, right? And it was like to make the total choice for everyone, and I felt the best thing that I could do was to give you Kick Push, right? The best thing selfishly for myself, but also to give to the world, a little bit of redemption song, as they say. And, as that relates to SOSA, I don't know, SOSA is not like my own, SOSA's not like my personality, it's not like a personal cult or something like that. It is very democratic, very distributed. But there is this kind of like idea that we try and implement into SOSA of, again, it's FUV, is it solid? Is it useful? Is it beautiful? Is what you're doing based on fundamental sound principles that are repeatable, that withstand the test of time, right? Or is it just whimsy and for the sake of the now, right? Here today, gone tomorrow. Can people actually use this, right? Is it something that they can actually add value to their lives? And then, lastly, is it something that's really good to hear, something that's really good to look at, or are you just giving people more of the noise, more of the same? I think one of the differences between myself and others outside of that choice, and same thing for you or any other rapper on this call, is tone, which is something that you'll discover once you get through content, you get through context, you get through all these different, you get through the fundamentals. It comes down to how your voice sounds on music, and folks like Drake, folks like Jay-Z, OTLT, they're very much so masters in their own right, but they also have the tone of the moment. They have a certain, my voice can sometimes come across as, nasally and maybe not the best voice you want to dance to, right? But there's just a little bit of that as well, of like what the decision to deal with the things that you're born with, and make the best out of those, and just respect and accept those things that come along with that. But also the intentionality of the cultural choices that you choose to make, and understanding the constraints and limitations that come along with that as well. So I think that I feel like if I'd have went down that route, I would have never made what I feel is what my legacy, what I want it to be, which is, SOSA. I wouldn't have made that, because I'd have been way too rich, had way too many chains to care. Maybe I'm joking, but I hope that answers your question, brother.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect again. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
So let me check while we're all here. If there is another question, we got captioning for another few minutes. So we can take one more if anybody wants to put a hand up, whether you're MIT or IT. Tesla?
Hi. I am a huge hip hop fan, and you were one of my favorite artists. And I had a question about how like a big thing that factors into my life and my relationship with hip hop is as a white person trying to engage with it in a way that is appreciative and collaborative and not appropriative. And I was wondering how SOSA thinks about this, educating about this, and also you have the ability to control who the membership is of who comes in or out, how you engage with ideas of who is in or out, and like talking about these sensitive issues.
Oh man, first of all, Tesla, amazing question, and thank you for it. But I have a question for you. Are you on a boat right now?
Yes, I study ocean robotics, and I'm living on a boat right now.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, Doc IT, is it possible to throw that question back to you? I mean, I can speak to it, but I think you embody everything that she just kind of asked,
Well, we were
I'll
talking,
field it as well.
right. So, I mean, we one of the things that I guess I brought up at the end of our conversation earlier is the idea that, hip hop originates because of African Americans in the Bronx, in Harlem, beginning this new type of practice involving rap, involving DJing, graffiti art, breakdancing is all part of that. Bringing the knowledge of a community together and in with that. At the same time, it's a global phenomenon. It's a global practice, and it's not just something that purely imitates like the American perspective. I mean, one of my friends, I was trying to explain, hip hop is really global to somebody. Nobody, there's nobody like doing hip hop in Greenland. It's like, oh, let's go on YouTube. We find out. Yeah, here's a native person in Greenland, rapping in his native language. And it's not about, it's not an imitation of something that goes on in the US. It's about the problems of that society and his perspective, right? My sense is that we want to be respectful. This is one of the reasons to study what the history of hip hop is. We need to be respectful of its origins, just as we always would. We need to acknowledge who the ancestors of the past are. And we also need to consider that there is hip hop in Japan, there is hip hop in France, there's hip hop in Greenland.
Mm-hmm. I bring up Doc IT because he is one of those, white rappers, who is damn good at it, and went through the process of really embedding himself in the culture that is rap and hip hop, outside of any other kind of constraints or limitations. But to directly get to your question, I mean, we get SOSA's a rainbow. It's a rainbow of individuals and folks from every religion to every color and demographic and even age group in certain degrees, and job skill level, and all of that is kind of represented fully in SOSA. And it's something to not get caught up in the color aspects or the demographic aspects, but to get caught up in the work aspects, and that's why we kind of reinforce and focused on objectivity and academia versus how dope do you think my song is, because there's no room to deal with would it be better if I was Black? Would it be better if I was Mexican? Would it be better if I was Japanese? It's like, no, can you explain what you just did? And let's let that be the first starting point, and then we can get into other nuances later, or maybe not, because we'll spend a majority of the time, or maybe hopefully the entirety of our time, talking about what you just did, versus who did it, and what their backing is. So, to your point, you're more than welcome to apply, no matter what race, color, creed you come from. Trust me, it's not about who you are, it's about what you do. And that's what's most important at SOSA.
All right, I think we came to a conclusion. Lupe IT, thank you so much for
Thank you, Doc
joining
IT.
us. It's great. I think it's really good to hear about the project of SOSA in a time when all of us are learning at a distance. It's also good to hear about the way you've been pushing through in these times, the way you've been productive, you've been contributing to communities. And we're looking forward to having you at MIT, fingers crossed, in person, being able to do some collaboration, being able to have some community work here. So thanks very much. We're really glad that we were able to get together in this format, and we'll look forward to the continuation of your time as a visiting artist.
Indeed. Thank you to the staff again. Thank you, Doc IT. Appreciate you. Thanks to everybody who tuned in and shared your time with me to hear me rant about these little things. More to come. Hopefully get a chance to make it down on campus and be able to touch and talk and see and move around and do different stuff like that. Really appreciative of the opportunity. We'll be making the best and the most out of it. And I hope it adds value to everyone involved. So appreciate you very much so.